With a potential break in one of the greatest mysteries in all of American history, I'm talking about the hunt for the true identity of D.B. Cooper. Now he is the infamous airplane hijacker who jumped out of on Thanksgiving Eve 1971. A man vanished from an airplane at 10,000 feet with $200,000 in ransom money, disappearing into legend. Using just a polite note about a bomb, he hijacked Northwest Flight 305, demanded cash and parachutes, then jumped into the stormy darkness over Washington state. Despite America's largest manhunt, Cooper was never found. Only a small portion of the money surfaced years later on a riverbank, deepening the mystery. Was he a skilled paratrooper who planned the perfect escape, an airline employee with inside knowledge, or did his daring leap end in disaster? 50 years later, this question still captivates the FBI and amateur sleuths. Who was D.B. Cooper, and how did he pull off the perfect crime? Skyjack era. The 1960s and early 1970s marked a golden age for air travel but also an unprecedented wave of airline hijackings. While today's passengers endure rigorous security checks, in 1971 you could stroll onto an airplane carrying virtually anything. There were no metal detectors, no ID requirements, and little passenger screening. This lax security environment created perfect conditions for what became known as skyjackings, sometimes occurring at the rate of one per week. Would you believe passengers could walk straight to the gate with no security screening whatsoever? Notes aviation historian James Baran, you could carry weapons, pay cash for tickets without showing ID, and board with minimal verification. Many hijackings during this period were politically motivated, with criminals demanding flights to Cuba or ransoms for political causes. Between 1968 and 1972, more than 130 American commercial aircraft were hijacked. The phenomenon became so common that some airlines began keeping Spanish-language maps and landing instructions for Havana in their cockpits just in case. Law enforcement agencies were struggling to develop effective countermeasures, but commercial pressures worked against them. Airlines feared that security checks would inconvenience passengers and reduce profits. The Federal Aviation Administration was caught between ensuring public safety and maintaining the commercial viability of air travel. It was in this vulnerable environment that one mysterious man spotted a perfect opportunity. Unlike politically motivated hijackers, this individual seemed interested solely in personal gain. He studied airport procedures, aircraft specifications, and possibly even weather patterns to develop a plan unlike any that came before it. When Cooper boarded Flight 305 on November 24, 1971, he exploited every weakness in the system. No one questioned his ticket purchase under a likely false name. No one searched his briefcase for explosives. And no one had reason to believe that this quiet, well-dressed passenger would soon orchestrate one of the most audacious crimes in American history, one that would ultimately change aviation security forever. The perfect passenger, how Cooper hijacked Flight 305. As Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 climbed into the cloudy Pacific Northwest sky on November 24, 1971, none of the 36 passengers or crew suspected anything unusual about the man in seat 18C. Described later as middle-aged, 5 feet 10 inches to 6 feet tall with dark hair and brown eyes, he wore a business suit with a black tie and white shirt, indistinguishable from countless business travelers that day. Flight attendant Florence Shaner barely noticed when the nondescript passenger handed her a note, assuming it contained someone's phone number, a common occurrence for attractive flight attendants in that era. She tucked it into her pocket without reading it. That's when the man leaned toward her and whispered something that made her blood run cold. "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." The handwritten message informed her that the man had a bomb in his briefcase. When she hesitantly sat beside him as instructed, he opened the case just enough to reveal what appeared to be red cylinders attached to wires. Whether it was a real explosive device or an elaborate hoax, the threat was clear. What would you do if suddenly faced with a seemingly calm man claiming to have a bomb, asks former FBI agent Larry Carr, who later worked the case. The flight attendants had to assume the worst and react perfectly to keep everyone safe. Cooper's demands were methodical and precise: $200,000 in unmarked $20 bills, equivalent to over $1.3 million today, 4 parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve, and no police tricks. If his requirements were met in Seattle, he promised to release all passengers unharmed. Throughout these tense negotiations, Cooper remained unerringly polite, even ordering a bourbon and soda and paying for it, including a tip. What's most remarkable is how Cooper maintained complete control without creating panic. Most passengers never realized their flight had been hijacked until they landed and were evacuated in Seattle. His calm demeanor and detailed demands suggested someone with careful planning and perhaps specialized knowledge. The question investigators immediately faced was whether Cooper was a professional criminal or just someone who'd reached his breaking point. Notes criminal psychologist Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, his methodical approach certainly suggested someone who'd thought this through thoroughly. The strange set of demands that would make this hijacking unlike any other and the critical clues Cooper may have accidentally revealed about his background. The exchange, ransom, parachutes, and a peculiar plan. As Flight 305 touched down in Seattle around 5:45 p.m., Cooper's unusual demands were already being assembled. FBI agents worked frantically to gather $200,000 in cash, specifically requesting bills with serial numbers beginning with the letter L from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, making them easier to trace if ever recovered. Perhaps more puzzling than the money were Cooper's parachute requirements, 2 main parachutes and 2 reserve chutes. Why 4 parachutes? Investigators initially feared he might force a crew member to jump with him, but another theory later emerged. Cooper might have been smart enough to request extras to ensure authorities wouldn't sabotage his only escape option. Imagine being the FBI agent who had to make that call, says former bureau specialist Michael Thompson. If you provide defective parachutes and Cooper forces an innocent person to jump, you've essentially signed their death warrant. Cooper's request was brilliantly strategic. What Cooper didn't know was that one of the main chutes provided was actually a training model that had been sewn shut, completely non-functional in a real jump. Whether this oversight revealed his inexperience or was simply bad luck remains debated to this day. While the negotiations continued, Cooper remained remarkably composed. He allowed all 36 passengers to disembark in Seattle but insisted that the pilots, a flight engineer, and 1 flight attendant remain on board. As darkness fell, he outlined the next phase of his plan, a flight to Mexico City with a refueling stop in Reno. But it was his specific flight requirements that raised eyebrows among the pilots. Cooper demanded they fly at just 10,000 feet with the landing gear down, wing flaps set at 15 degrees, and the cabin left unpressurized. These were extremely unusual parameters for a commercial flight but perfect conditions for someone planning to jump from the rear stairway of a Boeing 727. These weren't random demands, explains aviation expert Robert Bogash. They showed an understanding of the aircraft's capabilities and limitations. He needed a slow speed, low altitude, and access to the rear stairs. The question remains, where did he get this specialized knowledge? As the newly refueled plane taxied for takeoff into the rainy night sky shortly after 7:40 p.m., Cooper had his money, his parachutes, and his escape plan ready. But was he experienced enough to survive what would come next? The daring midair escape. As Flight 305 headed south through deteriorating weather conditions, Cooper made his final preparations in the rear of the aircraft. He had ordered the remaining crew members to stay in the cockpit with the door closed, giving him complete privacy for what came next. At approximately 8:13 p.m., something triggered a warning light in the cockpit. The aft stairway had been deployed. The Boeing 727 was unique among commercial aircraft in having a stairway that could be lowered during flight, a feature Cooper had seemingly researched in advance. When the pilot's voice came over the intercom asking if everything was all right, Cooper's reply was simple and direct: no. It was the last word anyone would ever hear from him. What followed was an exit into darkness and chaos that defies imagination. Picture this: a man jumping from a commercial airliner into a pitch-black stormy night, temperatures hovering around 0 degrees Fahrenheit at altitude, wearing only a business suit and loafers. No specialized equipment, no visibility, no certainty of where he would land in the vast wilderness below. Could you imagine making that jump in the dark in a storm over mountainous terrain? Asks professional skydiver James Dissor. It's practically a suicide mission, even for someone with hundreds of jumps under their belt. For a novice, nearly impossible. The aircraft continued to Reno with the rear stairs still deployed, creating a dramatic scene when it landed. FBI agents swarmed the plane but found it empty, except for a few items Cooper left behind: 3 plastic drink stirrers, his mother-of-pearl tie clasp, and most significantly, his black J.C. Penney clip-on tie. That tie would later become one of the most examined pieces of evidence in FBI history, yielding microscopic clues decades after the hijacking. But on that November night in 1971, investigators faced a far more immediate question: where was Cooper? Had he survived the jump, and if so, where would he have landed? Initial calculations placed Cooper's possible landing zone in a 28-mile stretch of difficult terrain in southwestern Washington, over 50,000 acres of dense forest, steep ravines, and freezing rivers. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, but much more difficult. The needle, after all, doesn't actively try to avoid being found. The theory that Cooper had perished during his jump with the money lost forever in the wilderness then came February 10, 1980, the day that turned the case upside down. 8-year-old Brian Ingram was vacationing with his family along the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington. While digging a fire pit on Tina Bar, a sandy stretch of riverbank, he uncovered 3 packages of cash. The deteriorating bundles contained 294 $20 bills, all with serial numbers matching the Cooper ransom money. The discovery hit the investigation like a lightning bolt, recalls Larry Carr, the FBI agent later assigned to the case. Finding that money raised more questions than answers: how did it get there, when was it buried, and why only that amount, $5,800 out of the $200,000? The money's location defied easy explanation. It was found 20 miles downstream from Cooper's suspected drop zone, yet the bills were neatly bundled together rather than scattered as would be expected if they'd been carried by river currents. More puzzling still, the area where Ingram found the money had been underwater during high river levels in 1974, suggesting the cash was deposited sometime after that date, years after the hijacking. Forensic examination of the bills revealed another anomaly. Despite exposure to the elements, the cash showed less deterioration than expected after 9 years. Did someone, perhaps Cooper himself, bury the money there years after the hijacking? Or was this evidence that Cooper had landed near the river, lost some cash during his escape, and the money had somehow remained bundled together despite years of river flooding? Some investigators proposed that the money had traveled downstream naturally during flood conditions, eventually becoming embedded in the sandy bank. Others believed Cooper might have hidden it there as a cash stash for later retrieval. A third theory suggested Cooper didn't survive and these bills simply separated from his body as it decomposed somewhere upriver. Whatever the explanation, the money find reignited public fascination with the case. Yet despite renewed attention and advanced forensic testing of the bills and their wrappings, the FBI couldn't determine conclusively how they ended up on Tina Bar. What makes this case so compelling is that each piece of evidence seems to contradict another, says criminal investigator Jennifer Dumas. The found money suggests Cooper survived, but if he did, why didn't more bills surface in circulation? Why risk burying evidence rather than spending it? The mysterious particles found on Cooper's tie might reveal his true identity, and the strange pattern of suspects who've emerged over 5 decades. Microscopic clues to Cooper's identity. Among the few items Cooper left behind on the plane, his black clip-on necktie would prove the most revealing. While initially considered just another personal effect, advances in forensic technology decades later transformed this simple accessory into a potential key to Cooper's identity. In 2007, FBI agent Larry Carr reopened certain aspects of the Cooper investigation and arranged for the tie to undergo electron microscope analysis. What scientists discovered was remarkable: more than 100,000 microscopic particles, including pure titanium, aluminum oxide, bismuth, and rare earth elements like cerium and strontium. This unusual combination pointed to someone who worked in a very specific environment. These particles tell us Cooper likely worked in a manufacturing environment dealing with metals, explains metallurgist Dr. Thomas Pertell. The presence of titanium is particularly interesting because in 1971 it was primarily used in aerospace manufacturing. Boeing, for example, was using it extensively in their aircraft production. The particle analysis fits with Cooper's apparent knowledge of aircraft, particularly the Boeing 727's unique rear staircase system. Did he gain this specialized knowledge because he worked in the industry? Was he perhaps an engineer, machinist, or chemical processor at Boeing or another aerospace firm? The Ti particles strongly suggest someone with access to an industrial environment where these rare metals were used or processed. Additional clues came from the Ti itself. Being a clip-on rather than a traditional Ti might indicate someone who worked around machinery, where a standard Ti could be dangerous if caught in equipment. The J.C. Penney brand suggested a middle-class background rather than someone of significant wealth or poverty. What would your Ti reveal about your daily life, asks forensic specialist Martha Corwin. Your clothing carries microscopic traces of every environment you spend time in, your home, workplace, hobbies. Cooper's Ti essentially preserved his occupational DNA. The forensic analysis painted a picture of someone who was likely not a professional criminal but rather an ordinary man with specialized knowledge, perhaps a disgruntled employee with inside information about aircraft and airport procedures. The Ti evidence aligned with behavioral analyses suggesting Cooper was methodical, knowledgeable, and detail-oriented. Yet despite this forensic breakthrough, investigators still couldn't match these occupational markers to a specific suspect. The Ti provided a profile, but not a name. And without DNA evidence to compare against potential suspects, this tantalizing clue remains just that, a clue without a conclusion. The parade of suspects who've been named as the possible D.B. Cooper and why each theory ultimately falls short. Suspect theories: could any of these men be Cooper? Over 5 decades, dozens of individuals have been suspected of being D.B. Cooper. Some were nominated by FBI investigators, others by journalists or amateur sleuths, and some even by family members making deathbed claims. Each theory contains compelling elements, yet none has provided irrefutable proof. Richard Floyd McCoy emerges as an early favorite. Just months after the Cooper hijacking, McCoy executed a remarkably similar skyjacking, parachuting from a United Airlines flight with $500,000 in ransom. He was captured days later at his home in Utah. As a Vietnam veteran with parachute training and a resemblance to Cooper's description, McCoy seemed like the perfect suspect. However, FBI agents ultimately ruled him out, noting physical discrepancies with witness descriptions and the fact that McCoy was reportedly in Las Vegas on the day of Cooper's hijacking. If you were planning a skyjacking, wouldn't you study previous successful attempts, asks criminal profiler Pat Brown. McCoy's similar method doesn't necessarily mean he was Cooper, it might mean he studied Cooper's case and improved upon it. Dwayne Weber represents one of the most intriguing possibilities. In 1995, his widow came forward claiming that before his death, Weber had confessed to being D.B. Cooper. She reported that he had nightmares about jumping from planes and once mumbled, "I left my fingerprints on the plane." Weber allegedly took her to Tina Bar years before the money was discovered there. Despite these compelling coincidences, FBI fingerprint analysis eventually eliminated Weber as a suspect. Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam-era paratrooper with explosives training and a remarkable resemblance to the Cooper sketches, became a leading suspect in the 2000s. He had the requisite skills, a criminal history, and was even investigated by the FBI in the late 1970s. Private investigators claimed to have found encrypted messages and letters allegedly sent by Cooper that pointed to Rackstraw's military service numbers. Rackstraw himself played coy about the allegations until his death in 2019, neither confirming nor explicitly denying them. Other notable suspects include Kenneth Christensen, a former Northwest Airlines purser with parachute training who reportedly made suspicious cash purchases after the hijacking, William Gossett, who allegedly confessed to his sons and possessed a key matching the handcuff keys used by Northwest Orient Airlines, and Barbara Dayton, a transgender woman who claimed to have committed the hijacking disguised as a man before later recanting her confession. The problem with the Cooper case isn't a shortage of suspects, it's that no single suspect checks all the boxes, explains FBI historian John Douglas. We have people with the right skills but wrong physical descriptions, people in the right place but without parachute experience, and people with suspicious behavior but solid alibis. How modern forensic techniques are bringing us closer than ever to solving this enduring mystery. Cold case breakthrough. Modern science tackles the mystery. While the FBI officially suspended active investigation of the Cooper case in 2016, advances in forensic science continue to offer new pathways towards solving this half-century mystery. Modern DNA analysis, computer modeling, and chemical testing methods unavailable in the 1970s have breathed new life into the aging evidence. In recent years, private researchers have extracted DNA samples from the clip-on tie Cooper left behind. Although partial and degraded, these samples could potentially be compared against suspects or their descendants using genetic genealogy, the same technique that recently identified the Golden State Killer after more than 40 years. The challenge remains finding a confirmed sample of Cooper's DNA to establish a baseline comparison. The tie is essentially covered in Cooper's skin cells and sweat residue, explains forensic scientist Dr. Angela Reynolds. While we couldn't get a complete profile due to degradation, even partial DNA could eliminate suspects or potentially identify family connections through ancestry databases. Modern computer modeling has also revolutionized understanding of Cooper's possible jump zone. Using advanced weather data analysis, aircraft performance metrics, and parachute drift calculations, scientists have created more precise maps of where Cooper likely landed. Some models suggest he may have come down significantly east of the original search area, potentially explaining why no trace was found despite extensive searching. If you were jumping from a plane into darkness, could you accurately gauge your position? Asks skydiving expert Michael Coleman. Even experienced jumpers would struggle to hit a target zone under those conditions. Cooper could have been miles from where investigators were searching. Chemical analysis of the rubber bands holding together the money found at Tina Bar revealed another fascinating clue. The bands had not significantly degraded despite years of presumed exposure, suggesting they weren't in the water for the entire period between 1971 and 1980. This finding contradicts theories that the money floated downstream immediately after the hijacking. Perhaps most intriguing are emerging theories about Cooper's actual jump time and location. By reconstructing the flight path using original navigation records and pilot interviews, some investigators now believe Cooper may have jumped earlier than initially thought, potentially placing him in a completely different area than where the FBI concentrated their search efforts. The case has also attracted citizen scientists who apply modern technology to historical data. Online communities dedicated to the Cooper mystery use sophisticated tools to analyze everything from wind patterns to soil composition in potential landing zones. These collaborative efforts have generated new leads currently being explored by private investigators. The profound cultural impact of the Cooper legend and why this case continues to captivate our imagination 50 years later. Cooper's enduring cultural impact. Few crimes in American history have captured the public imagination like the D.B. Cooper hijacking. What explains our continuing fascination with this particular criminal case 50 years later? The answer lies in a perfect storm of mystery, daring, and cultural timing that transformed the hijacker into a folk hero. Cooper emerged at a pivotal moment in American history when public trust in institutions was eroding due to Vietnam and Watergate. His audacious, non-violent crime against a corporate entity struck a chord with a population increasingly skeptical of authority. Unlike most criminals, Cooper harmed no one physically. He was polite, even gentlemanly by witness accounts. And then, most importantly, he vanished completely. Cooper represented something uniquely American, explains cultural historian Rebecca Johnson. He was the lone individual who beat the system through intelligence rather than violence. Whether he survived or not almost doesn't matter. The legend of the man who outsmarted the FBI, the airlines, and conventional wisdom was established the moment he jumped. This cultural resonance has spawned countless references across popular media. Cooper appears in everything from television shows like Prison Break and Breaking Bad to songs by Kid Rock and Chuck Berry. Annual D.B. Cooper Days celebrations in Washington state attract thousands of enthusiasts. Books, documentaries, and podcasts analyzing the case continue to multiply each year. The Cooper case has also had lasting practical impacts. The Cooper vane, a device preventing the deployment of a Boeing 727's rear stairs during flight, became standard equipment after the hijacking. More broadly, the entire incident accelerated the implementation of modern airport security measures, including passenger screening and metal detectors that are now universal. Perhaps most significantly, Cooper created a mystery that seems deliberately constructed to remain unsolved. Even if he perished in the jump, as many FBI agents believe, he did so in a way that left no trace. If he survived, he showed remarkable discipline in never spending the marked bills or revealing his identity. Either scenario feels like the final act of a master showman who understood that legends grow in the absence of conclusions. Would this case fascinate us if it had been solved immediately? Asks true crime author Michelle McNamara. Probably not. It's the unanswered questions that keep us coming back, the possibility that someone pulled off the impossible and walked away forever. Today, as aging investigators retire and witnesses pass away, solving the Cooper mystery becomes increasingly unlikely. Yet interest only seems to grow with time. Something about this ordinary-looking man who performed an extraordinary feat, whether suicidal or brilliant, continues to resonate with our desire for answers and our secret admiration for those who defy the odds. The question that began this mystery remains unanswered: who was D.B. Cooper? But perhaps the more important question is, who have we made him into, and what does our fascination with his story reveal about ourselves? Thanks for watching another episode.